The Harvest Moon Murders. Nobody became suspicious when the scarecrow appeared. It stood at the edge of an abandoned cornfield outside Briar Falls, dressed in faded overalls and an old flannel shirt. Drivers had passed it for years without giving it much thought. Then one October morning, a farmer noticed something strange. The scarecrow had moved. It was standing almost 50 yards from where he remembered seeing it the previous evening. Thinking teenagers had been playing a prank, he walked into the field to move it back. That's when he saw the blood. Dark stains covered the scarecrow's clothing. Police arrived within minutes. Forensic testing confirmed the blood was human. It belonged to 25-year-old Natalie Brooks, who had disappeared 17 days earlier after leaving a friend's house. Natalie was still missing. Search teams flooded the property. Near the center of the cornfield, cadaver dogs alerted beside an old irrigation ditch. Natalie's body was recovered that afternoon. But she wasn't alone. Another body was discovered nearby. Then another. By sunset, investigators had recovered 4 victims. The oldest remains had been there for almost 5 years. Every victim had been murdered. The abandoned property belonged to the family of a farmer who had died nearly a decade earlier. His children lived hundreds of miles away and rarely visited. Detectives searched the entire property. Inside a collapsing barn, investigators discovered dried blood across sections of the concrete floor. DNA matched 2 victims. Someone had used that barn during the murders. But there were no fingerprints. No usable DNA belonging to a suspect. Then investigators noticed something disturbing about the disappearances. Every victim had vanished between September and October. Different years, same season. Even stranger, every disappearance occurred within 3 nights of a full moon. The newspapers named them the Harvest Moon Murders. 3 weeks after the name appeared publicly, the sheriff's department received an envelope. Inside was a photograph. It showed the cornfield at night. The scarecrow stood beneath the moon. 4 words were written across the bottom. Why are you found this year's? There were no fingerprints, no return address, but detectives immediately focused on one word. Years. It suggested there were others. Investigators reopened missing person cases going back 20 years. Several disappearances fit the pattern. Search teams returned to the farm with ground-penetrating radar. 3 additional bodies were eventually recovered. 7 victims. Then investigators found their first promising clue. A partial boot print preserved inside the barn. The tread belonged to a specialized work boot commonly worn by agricultural workers. Police obtained sales records. Hundreds of pairs had been purchased throughout the region. Every buyer they could identify was investigated. Nothing. The following autumn, police surrounded the property during the full moon. Officers hid throughout the woods. Unmarked vehicles watched surrounding roads. Nothing happened. The following year was the same. Detectives began believing the killer had either moved away, died, or become frightened by the investigation. Then, almost 4 years after the original discovery, everything started again. A family hiking 30 miles from Briar Falls noticed a scarecrow standing beside an abandoned orchard. Its clothing was stained with dried blood. Police immediately recognized the pattern. Testing showed the blood belonged to a man who had disappeared 9 days earlier. His body was recovered nearby. But investigators found something else attached to the scarecrow. A photograph. It showed detectives searching the original Briar Falls cornfield 4 years earlier. 7 officers were clearly visible near the barn. The photograph had been taken from inside the field, close enough to see their faces. Someone had been watching the investigation. On the back were 3 words, I was there. Every person who had entered the original crime scene was investigated. Officers, volunteers, reporters, farm workers, even relatives of the victims. No suspect emerged. 8 murders have now been officially connected to the Harvest Moon case. Investigators believe there may be others. No killer has ever been identified. And every September, police quietly increase patrols around abandoned farms throughout the county. Because investigators eventually realized the most frightening part wasn't the bodies. It was the photograph. Hundreds of officers had spent weeks searching the cornfield. They believed they were hunting someone who had disappeared long before police arrived. But somewhere among the rows of dying corn, someone had stood close enough to photograph them. Watching, waiting, and knowing that while everyone was searching for the killer may have been watching them search.